Matter is necessary to give form, but the value of reality lies in its immateriality. Everything that lives has a physical body, but the value of a life is measured by the soul. Hi, this is Jim Young, and you're listening to a special solo episode of Expansive Intimacy. Welcome to Expansive Intimacy. I'm your host, Jim Young, and I'm on a quest to help men like you and me discover how to apply intimacy to unlock new, expansive versions of success in your relationships, your work, and your life. With each episode, we'll take another deep dive into the intimacy toolkit to show you how you can enhance your emotional intelligence, leadership abilities, and relationship skills. So settle in and open up, because it's time to get intimate. Hey everybody, welcome back or welcome to Expansive Intimacy. I'm your host, Jim Young, and I was inspired by a couple of events this week to do a solo episode, which I like to do every once in a while, to unpack some of the things that I'm discovering and learning about intimacy as I work on this project. The first event that got me thinking about this episode was an encounter I had. I was driving into the vibrant little downtown of the small city I live in Western Massachusetts. And I came to a stoplight. And as I sat there, a bicycle pulled up to the side of me. And I looked and I said, "Oh, I know that guy." And the guy that I noticed next to me on the bike was a man who I had known for probably 15 years. We used to be neighbors, and our kids have gone to school together. And the more important part of how I know this guy is that he invited me to the very first men's group that I ever attended. And this was probably about, I'll say 12, 13 years ago at this point. And I'll never forget walking into the office of this building where he worked. He had a small office for a practice that he ran there. And there were about 4 other guys. And I didn't know what to expect. I was pretty nervous. Like, what am I walking into here? And I took that risk anyway. And I remember one of the first things that this guy did was he took out a book and he read a passage from it. And the book was the Tao Te Ching, the Stephen Mitchell translation, which I subsequently bought a copy of and have dog-eared many times over in the past dozen years, learning from one of the great wisdom books that's out there. And in this first ever men's group meeting that I attended, this guy simply read a short passage to inspire the conversation. And that page of the Tao, chapter 9, is among my favorite writings. And I decided that today I actually wanted to read a different page that I think is a little bit more relevant to intimacy. And it's chapter 11. This is from a different version of the Tao. And chapter 11 is on immateriality. And let's read that briefly. A wheel may have 30 spokes, but its usefulness lies in the empty hub. A jar is formed from clay, but its usefulness lies in the empty center. A room is made from 4 walls, but its usefulness lies in the space between. Matter is necessary to give form, but the value of reality lies in its immateriality. Everything that lives has a physical body, but the value of a life is measured by the soul. I hadn't read this translation until very recently. As I said, I've read the Stephen Mitchell translation many times over, but this was a slightly different translation. And it's interesting to me that this passage that I picked this morning talks about spokes because I ran into my friend on his bike. But more importantly, or more relevantly, is I think if we look at some of the wording here, that the 30 spokes of a wheel, it's a way of counting and it's a way of measuring. And I think that's one of the things that I tend to get stuck on, continue to get stuck on, have long gotten stuck on, is measuring myself by some number, by some measure of worth that I think can be quantified and recognized. And while the wheel may have 30 spokes, the empty hub is the usefulness. And if we follow all the way down to the end of that reading, it's the soul. The value of a life is measured by its soul. And when I was in that first ever men's group meeting a dozen years ago, I wanted to show up and let people know what I was and what I could do. I wanted to prove myself. And it ended up not mattering. It ended up that what really mattered was that I was just myself and that I was able to be open and willing to learn, willing to share, and willing to listen. And this brings me to the second event that I wanted to, that inspired this episode today, is I had a meeting yesterday with the men's group that I've been meeting with for 2.5 years, coming up on 3 years, I believe. And it's a very, very different group. And you might guess that it would be, since when it formed 2.5 years ago, we were in the depths of a major pandemic and we couldn't get together. I couldn't walk into some small office in my downtown and meet with 6 guys, 5 guys in a common space. Couldn't do it. Yet I still had the urge, and I had been part of other men's groups and men's retreats over the years and learned from those experiences just how much was there for me, how much there was in being in conversation with a bunch of other guys where there wasn't accounting, there weren't 30 spokes that we needed to figure out or share or show. It was about the empty hub. It was about emptying ourselves out. And this group that I'm now fortunate to be a part of formed by a couple of us saying, hey, we'd like to have a conversation with more guys around some of these topics that are important to us. And it started off with a little bit of a work focus, but more ideological beliefs about how we can create better organizations, better experiences for workers. And it blossomed into something a lot bigger. We organically grew this group. There have been some people who joined and then ended up leaving, and some people who've replaced them. But over the years, we've had a core group of people that currently sits at, I believe, 9 of us. And as you also might guess, they're from all over. So there's a guy in Seattle and a guy in Edmonton, Canada, and a couple of guys in the Bay Area out by San Francisco, a few of us in some small New England towns, a guy in DC. I've only ever met in person one of these guys. I'm going to meet the second of them this weekend, and I'm pretty excited for that. And though we've never shared the same physical space, we've shared so much more than I've shared in many of my relationships over the years. Every month we get together for 90 minutes and we open it up. We look into the empty center of the jar of clay. We explore the empty hub of our wheels for a little bit more specific, but not. We have an anonymous group. We were a confidential group. So I'm not going to share any details of what anybody says, but just to give a little bit of an idea of what these conversations can be like when you find a group of men who are willing to share with you their experience of life. Yesterday, we welcomed a guest to our group, and the conversation started off with just helping each other know what's going on in our lives with a check in. And eventually, it came back around to the guest who had shared something very vulnerable about a personal relationship that he has that's causing him some real struggles. And it was remarkable. This guest knew a few of the members of our men's group from prior encounters, but didn't know all of us. And I had met this person one time in a virtual event in a breakout room for 20 minutes. And yet somehow we had built the safety for him to share that he was really struggling and he didn't know what to do about this important relationship in his life. And we proceeded organically to say, let's take that topic from this guy's share, from his check-in, and let's see if he needs support. And he said yes. He said, yeah, it'd be great to have a little bit of time to talk about this and explore it with you all. And what we did was not come in and say, hey, here's what you should do. I went through something like that, and here's the thing to do. Let's fix that for you. Instead, what we did was we listened a little bit more to some more details of his story. Then we started asking him some questions that he could start to assess. And we gave him probably 6 or 8 or 10 different angles at looking at this situation, at least a few of which he hadn't seen before. And in looking at the dynamics of how he was approaching the relationship or dealing with some specific encounters or what his values are, all sorts of ways that we could look at this issue with him, he started to relax. He started to smile a little bit. And at the end, when we did some quiet reflection time and gave him some space, created some of that quiet, empty space, which we typically do in these meetings. We gave him 5 minutes of quiet time along with ourselves to reflect. A lot of that, I'll call it wisdom, showed up for him. And he knew a lot better how he wanted to proceed. And he felt confident that he could make progress in this relationship that means so much to him. And so whether we're meeting with 5 guys in a room or 10 guys in a Zoom virtual setting or some other format, I really think that I'm going to say imperative. It's not even a nice to have. I think it's crucial for men to be in conversations with other men where they get to show their cards and they get to do that in a way where they're not going to be judged, where they're going to be supported, where they're going to be seen for the struggles that they have. And doing that consistently, I think, is incredibly important. I talk about expansive intimacy as a tool set for men to navigate this modern world in a way that they can thrive in their relationships and all the people around them and their organizations can thrive. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not flipping a switch. I've been working on this for at least 12 years, and it takes small practices. Intimacy is built over time, and it's built in risky moves like joining a men's group, like opening up to a new men's group that you just walked into with something vulnerable, to taking the time to be quiet, to listen. And so if you are a guy or know a guy who hasn't experienced this kind of conversation, I'd love for you to share this episode with him, because this is where men get resourced and supported and can kind of come out of the counting type of self-worth stories that we tell ourselves, that we have to have 30 spokes on our bike, that we have to have a job title that is impressive to be worth something, that we have to make more money, that we have to, instead of being the deeply connected, committed, caring people that we want to be, while also doing all of those other accomplish, achieve type of things. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week. We're going to come back to having a guest this next episode, and I'm excited for that episode. It's with a good friend of mine who has a book that he just really released. I've been loving having authors on to hear what they are exploring. Hey guys, it's Jim. Thanks for listening to the show. If you're enjoying these episodes and are wanting to bring a little bit more of those relational skills into your work and your life, get in touch. I keep a couple of slots open for one-on-one coaching with guys to help them develop their emotional intelligence, their relationship skills, their leadership ability, all so that they could live the most successful and happy lives possible. Just email me at jim@thecenteredcoach.com. We can have a short call to see how I might be able to help you. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. I really look forward to seeing you next week on Expansive Intimacy with me, Jim Young. I'd also love your help with expanding intimacy even further. Would you take a minute right now to rate the show and write a review? It's the best way for us to bring more people into the conversation. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.